When dawn had risen from the bed where she sleeps beside illustrious Tithonus, to bring daylight to immortals and to mortals, the gods sat down in assembly, and among them Zeus the Thunderer, the greatest of them all. The imprisonment of Odysseus in Calypso's home was heavy on Athene's heart, and she now recalled the tale of his misfortunes to their mind.
Father Zeus, and you are the blessed gods who live forever. Kindness, generosity, and justice should no longer be the aims of any man who wields a royal scepter. In fact, he may as well just devote his days to tyranny and lawless deeds. Look at Odysseus, that admirable king. Today, not one of the people he once ruled like a loving father gives him a single thought. He is left to languish in misery in the island home of the nymph Calypso, who keeps him captive there. Not that he could reach Ithaca in any case, for he has neither ships fitted with oars nor crew to carry him so far across the sea. Meanwhile, his beloved son has gone to sacred Pylos and blessed Lacedaemon for news of his father, and they mean to murder him on the way back.
My child,
replied the gatherer of the clouds.
What are you saying? Did you not plan all this yourself? Was it not your idea that Odysseus should return and take revenge on these men? As for Telemachus, use your own skill. You have the power to bring him back to Ithaca safe and sound, and let the suitors sail home again in their ship with nothing accomplished.
Zeus now turned to Hermes, his beloved son. Another one?
Hermes,
he said,
as you are our usual messenger, convey our final decision to that nymph of the plaited tresses. The long-enduring Odysseus must now set out for home. On the journey he shall have neither gods nor men to help him. He shall set out on a raft put together by his own hands, and on the 20th day, after great hardship, reach Scheria, the rich country of the Phaeacians, who are close to the gods. They will take him to their hearts and treat him like a god. They will convey him by ship to his own land, giving him bronze, gold, and woven materials in such quantities as he never could have won for himself from Troy, even if he had come away with his fair share of the spoil. This is how it is ordained that he shall see his friends and come to his high-roofed house and his native land once more.
Zeus had spoken. His messenger, the giant killer, obeyed. Immediately he bound on his feet the lovely sandals of untarnishable gold that carried him with the speed of the wind over the water or the boundless earth, and he picked up the wand, which he can use at will to cast a spell upon men's eyes or waken them from sleep. With this wand in his hand, the mighty giant killer made his flight. From the upper air he dropped into the Pierian range, and from there swooped down on the sea, and skimmed the waves like a seagull, drenching the feathers of its wings with spray as it pursues the fish down fearsome troughs of the unharvested deep. So Hermes rode wave after wave, till at length he reached the remote island, where, leaving the blue waters of the sea, he came to the great cavern where the nymph of the lovely locks was living. He found her at home. A large fire was blazing on the hearth, and the scent from burning logs of juniper and cedar was wafted far across the island. Inside, Calypso was singing with her beautiful voice as she went to and fro at her loom, weaving with a golden shuttle. The cave was sheltered by a copse of alders and fragrant cypresses, which was the roosting place of wide-winged birds, horned owls and falcons, and cormorants with the long tongues, birds of the coast, whose business takes them down to the sea. Trailing round the mouth of the cavern was a thriving garden vine, with great bunches of grapes. From 4 separate but neighbouring springs, 4 crystal rivulets were channelled to run this way and that, and in soft meadows on either side, iris and wild celery flourished. It was indeed a spot where even an immortal visitor must pause to gaze in wonder and delight. The messenger, the giant killer, stood and gazed at the scene. When he had gazed at it all to his heart's content, he passed into the great cavern. The goddess Calypso knew him the moment she raised her eyes to his face, for none of the immortal gods is a stranger to his fellows, even though his home may be remote from theirs. As for the lion-hearted Odysseus, Hermes did not find him in the cave, for he was sitting disconsolate on the shore in his accustomed place, tormenting himself with tears and sighs and heartache, and looking out across the barren sea with streaming eyes. The divine Calypso seated Hermes on a brightly polished chair and asked him,
Hermes of the Golden Wand, what brings you here? You are an honoured and welcome guest, though in the past your visits have been few. Tell me what is in your mind, and I will gladly do what you ask of me, if I can, and if it must be so. But first, follow me inside and let me offer you hospitality.
The goddess now put some ambrosia on a table, drew it to his side, and mixed him a cup of red nectar. The messenger, the giant killer, began to eat and drink, and when he had dined and refreshed himself, he answered Calypso's questions.
As one immortal to another, you ask me what has brought me here. Since you command me, I shall tell you frankly. It was Zeus who sent me. It was no wish of mine to come, for who would choose to race across that vast expanse of salt water? It seemed unending, and not a city on the way, not a mortal soul to offer a choice sacrifice to a god. But when Zeus, who bears the Aegis, makes up his mind, it is impossible for any other god to thwart him or evade his will. He says that you have with you here a man who has been dogged by misfortune, more so indeed than any of those with whom he shared the 9 years of fighting round the walls of Troy, and left for home when they had sacked it in the 10th. In setting out, they gave offence to Athene, who raised a violent gale, and heavy seas against them. His noble companions were lost to a man, but he himself was swept here by the wind and waves, and now Zeus bids you send him off without delay. He is not doomed to end his days on the island, away from all his friends. He is destined to see his friends and come to his high-roofed house and his native land once more.
At his words, the divine Calypso shuddered. Her words winged their way to him.
You are hard-hearted, you gods, and unmatched for jealousy. You are outraged if a goddess sleeps openly with a man, even if she has chosen him as her husband. You were the same when rosy-fingered Dawn fell in love with Orion. Free and easy yourselves, you were outraged at her conduct, and in the end chaste Artemis of the Golden Throne rose, attacked him in Ortygi with her gentle arrows and left him dead. They're hardly gentle then, are they? And so again, when the lovely Demeter gave way to her desire and made love to her beloved Iasion in the field of the 3 ploughed furrows, Zeus heard of it quickly enough and struck him dead with his blinding thunderbolt. And now it is my turn to incur the envy of you gods for living with a mortal man, a man whom I rescued from death as he was drifting alone astride the keel of his ship, when Zeus had shattered it with his lightning bolt out on the wine-dark sea, and all his fine comrades were lost. But he was driven to this island by the wind and waves, and I welcomed him with open arms. I tended him. I offered to make him immortal and ageless. But now, since no god can evade or thwart the will of Aegis-bearing Zeus, let him go. If Zeus insists that he should leave, then let him be gone across the barren water, and good riddance to him. But I will not help him on his way, not I. I have no ship fitted with oars, no crew to carry him so far across the seas. Yet I do promise, with a good grace and unreservedly, to give him such directions as will bring him safe and sound to his native land.
She's a bit of a child, really, isn't she? They're taking her toy away from her. She was all, "Oh, hi, Hermes, nice to see you. What do you want?" I'd like Odysseus freed. You bastard!
Then send him off at once,
The messenger, the giant killer, said.
and so avoid provoking Zeus, or he may be angry and punish you one day.
With this, the mighty giant killer took his leave. The nymph at once went to the valiant Odysseus, finally getting to actually see Odysseus for the first time. We're only on book 5. For the message from Zeus had not fallen on deaf ears. She found him sitting on the shore. His eyes were wet with weeping, as they always were. Life, with its sweetness, was ebbing away in the tears he shed for his lost home. For the nymph had long since ceased to please. At nights, it is true, he had to sleep with her in the vaulted cavern, cold lover, ardent lady. But the days found him sitting on the rocks or wait. When you say sleep, oh, she him. At nights, it is true, he had to sleep with her in the vaulted cavern, cold lover, ardent lady. But the days found him sitting on the rocks or sands, torturing himself with tears, groans, and heartache, and looking out with streaming eyes across the watery wilderness. The goddess came and stood beside him now.
My unhappy friend, she said, don't go on grieving. Don't waste any more of your life on this island, for I am ready with all my heart to help you leave it. Come now, fell some tall trees with an axe, make a wide raft, and fit half decks on top so that it can carry you across the misty seas. I will stock it myself with bread, water, and red wine to your liking, so that you need be in no fear of starvation. And I'll give you clothing too, and send you a following wind, so that you may reach your own country safe and sound, if it please the gods of the broad sky, who have more power to plan and to ordain than I have.
The stalwart, good Odysseus shuddered at this, and addressed her with words that flew.
Goddess, it is surely not my safety you were thinking about, but something else, when you tell me to cross this formidable sea in such a craft. Even the fastest sailing ships do not cross it, though they like nothing better than the winds of heaven. So I shall not entrust myself to a raft unless I can count on your good will, and you give me your solemn oath that you will not plot some other mischief against me.
Calypso, the divine goddess, smiled and stroked him with her hand.
Odysseus,
She protested.
what a rogue you are to say such a thing. It shows the crafty way your mind works. Now let earth be my witness, with the broad sky above, the waters of Styx that flow below, the greatest and most solemn oath the blessed gods can take, that I plot no other mischief against you, but am considering only what I should do on my own behalf, if I found myself in such a plight. For I have some sense of what is fair, and my heart is not made of iron. I know what pity is.
With these words, the gracious goddess moved swiftly away, and he followed her. She's not exactly gracious when she's being forced to let her sex slave go. The goddess and the man reached the great cavern together, and Odysseus seated himself on the chair that Hermes had just left. The nymph placed at his side the various kinds of food and drink that mortal men consume, and sat down facing the noble Odysseus. Her maids set ambrosia and nectar beside her. Who are her maids? And the two helped themselves to the meal spread before them. When they had enjoyed the food and drink, the goddess Calypso began to speak.
So, you are determined, son of Laertes, favourite of Zeus. Ingenious Odysseus, to leave at once for home and your beloved Ithaca? Even so, I wish you happiness. Yet had you any inkling of the full measure of misery that you are bound to endure before you reach your native land, you would stay and share this home with me and take on immortality. However much you long to see that wife of yours, who is never out of your thoughts, and yet I claim to be by no means her inferior in looks or figure, for surely it would be most unseemly for a woman to compete with a goddess in form and face.
To this the nimble-witted Odysseus replied,
My lady goddess, do not be angry at what I am about to say. I too know well enough that my wise Penelope's looks and stature are insignificant compared with yours, for she is mortal, while you have immortality and unfading youth. Nevertheless, I long to reach my home and see the day of my return. It is my never-failing wish. And what if one of the gods does wreck me out on the wine-dark sea? I have a heart that is inured to suffering, and I shall steel it to endure that too. For in my day I have had many bitter and painful experiences in war and on the stormy seas. So let this new disaster come. It only makes one more.
By now the sun had set and it grew dark, so the two retired to a recess in the cavern, and there, no. He doesn't actually want to do this. So the two retired to a recess in the cavern, and there in each other's arms they found pleasure in making love. Wonderful! As soon as dawn appeared, fresh and rosy-fingered, Odysseus put on his tunic and cloak, and the nymph dressed herself in a long silvery mantle of a fine and elegant material, with a splendid golden belt around her waist and a scarf over her head. Then she planned her noble guest's departure. First she gave him a great axe of bronze. Its double blade was sharp, and the shapely handle of olive wood fixed firmly to its head was comfortable to hold. Next she handed him, I don't know what that is, adze? Next she handed him an adze of polished metal. What is an adze? A-D-Z-E. And led the way to the farthest part of the island, where the trees grew tall, alders and poplars and towering firs, all dry timber that had long since lost its sap and would make buoyant material for his raft. When she had shown him the place where the trees were tallest, the gracious goddess went home, and Odysseus began to cut down the trees. He worked fast and felled 20 in all, and lopped their branches with his axe, then trimmed them in a workmanlike manner, and with a line made their edges straight. Presently Calypso brought him boring tools. With these he drilled through all his planks, cut them to fit each other, and fixed this flooring together by means of dowels driven through the interlocking joints, giving the same width to his raft as a skilled shipwright would choose in rounding out the hull for a broad-bottomed trading vessel. He next put up the decking, which he fitted to ribs at short intervals, finishing with long gunwales down the sides. He made a mast to go in the raft, and constructed a half-deck and a rudder to keep it on its course. And from stem to stern, he fenced its sides with plaited osier twigs and a plentiful backing of brushwood, as some protection against the heavy seas. Meanwhile, the goddess Calypso had brought him cloth with which to make the sail. This too he skilfully made, then lashed to braces, halyards and sheets in their places on board. Finally he dragged it down on rollers into the bright sea. By the end of the 4th day all his work was done, and on the 5th the goddess Calypso saw him off from the island. She bathed him first, and dressed him in sweet-smelling clothes. She had also stowed 2 skins in his boat, one full of dark wine, the other larger one of water, as well as a leather sack of grain and quantities of appetizing meats. And now a warm and gentle breeze sprang up at her command. It was with a happy heart that the noble Odysseus spread his sail to catch the wind, and skilfully kept the raft on course with the rudder. There he sat, and never closed his eyes in sleep, but kept them on the Pleiades, or watched the late-setting booties. or watch the late-setting booties slowly fade, or the great bear, sometimes called the wain, which always wheels round in the same place and looks across at Orion the hunter with a wary eye. It was this constellation, the only one which never sinks below the horizon to bathe in ocean's stream, that the wise goddess Calypso had told him to keep on his left hand as he sailed across the sea. So for 17 days he sailed on his course, and on the 18th there came into view the shadowy mountains of the Phaeacians' country, which jutted out to meet him. The land looked like a shield laid on the misty sea. But now Poseidon, lord of the earthquake, who was on his way back from his visit to the Ethiopians, observed him from the distant mountains of Solymi. The sight of Odysseus sailing over the seas enraged him. He shook his head and said to himself,
Damnation! I had only to go to Ethiopia for the gods to change their minds about Odysseus, and there he is, close to the Phaeacians' land, where he is destined to bring his long ordeal to an end. Nevertheless, I mean to let him have a bellyful of trouble yet.
With that he marshalled the clouds, and seizing his trident in his hand, stirred up the sea. He roused the stormy blasts of every wind that blows, and covered land and water alike with a canopy of cloud. Darkness swooped down from the sky. The east wind and the south wind and the tempestuous west wind clashed together, and the north wind came from the upper sky, rolling a great wave in front of it. Odysseus' knees shook, and his spirit failed. In anguish he communed with his great heart.
Poor wretch that I am, what will become of me after all? I fear the goddess prophesied all too well when she told me I should have my full measure of misery on the sea before I reach my native land. Every word she said is coming true. At Zeus's command, the whole sky is heavy with clouds.
No, it was Poseidon.
The sea is seething, squalls from every quarter hurtle together. There is nothing for me now but sudden death. 3 and 4 times blessed are those countrymen of mine who fell long ago on the broad plains of Troy in loyal service to the sons of Atreus. If only I too could have met my fate and died the day the Trojan hordes let fly at me with their bronze spears over Achilles' corpse. I should at least have had my burial rites, and the Achaeans would have spread my fame abroad. But now it seems I was predestined to an ignoble death.
As he spoke, a mountainous wave, advancing with awesome speed, crashed down upon him from above and whirled his raft round. The rudder was torn from his hands, and he himself was tossed off the raft. At the same moment, the warring winds joined forces in one tremendous gust, which snapped the mast in two and flung the sail and half-deck far out into the sea. For a long time, the water kept him under. Weighed down by the clothes which the goddess Calypso had given him, he could not quickly fight his way up against the downrush of that mighty wave. But at last he reached the air and spat out the bitter brine that poured down his face. Exhausted though he was, he did not forget his raft, but struck out after it through the surf, scrambled up, and sitting in the middle of it avoided the finality of death. The heavy seas thrust him with the current this way and that, like the north wind at harvest time tossing about the fields, a ball of thistles that have stuck together. The gusts drove his craft hither and thither over the sea. Thither is a good word, you don't hear that very often. Now the south wind would toss it to the north to play with, and now the east would leave it for the west to chase. But there was a witness of Odysseus' plight. This was the daughter of Cadmus. I know, of the slim ankles. Who was once a mortal woman speaking like ourselves, but now lives in the salt depths of the sea, and as Leucothoe, the white goddess, has been acknowledged by the gods. She took pity on the forlorn and afflicted Odysseus, rose from the water like a seagull on wing, and settled on his raft.
Poor man, she said to him, why is Poseidon, lord of the earthquake, so violently at odds with you that he puts all these disasters in your path? At any rate, he shall not kill you, however hard he tries. Now do exactly what I say, like the sensible man you seem to be. Take off those clothes, leave your raft for the winds to play with, and swim for your life to the Phaeacian coast, where deliverance awaits you. Here, take this veil and wind it round your waist. With its divine protection you need not be afraid of injury or death. But directly you touch the dry land with your hands, undo the veil and throw it far from the shore into the wine-dark sea. As you do so, turn your eyes away.
As she spoke, the goddess gave him the veil, and then like a gull she dived back into the turbulent sea, and the dark waters swallowed her up. Stalwart Odysseus was left in perplexity and distress, and once more took counsel with his indomitable soul, saying with a groan,
I'm afraid this is one of the immortals, setting a snare to catch me, with her advice to abandon my raft. No, I will not leave the raft for a moment. I saw with my own eyes how far the land is where she promised me salvation. I shall do what I myself think is best. As long as the joints of the planks hold fast, I shall stay where I am and endure the suffering. But when the seas break up my raft, I shall swim for it. I cannot think of anything better.
As Odysseus was turning this over in his heart and his mind, Poseidon the Earthshaker sent him another monster wave. Grim and menacing, it curled above his head, then hurtled down and scattered the long timbers of his raft, as a boisterous wind will toss a dry heap of chaff and scatter it in all directions. Odysseus scrambled onto one of the beams, and sitting astride like a rider on horseback, cast off the clothes that divine Calypso had given him. Then he wound the veil round his waist, and with his arms outstretched, plunged headlong into the sea, and boldly struck out. The lord Poseidon saw him, shook his head, and said to himself,
Well, so much for you. Now make your miserable way across the sea until you come into the hands of a people favoured by the gods. Even so, I don't think you'll find any fault with your buffeting.
With this, Poseidon lashed his long-maned horses and drove to Aegae, where he had his famous palace. At this point, Athene, daughter of Zeus, decided to intervene. She checked all the other winds in their courses, bidding them calm down and go to sleep. She summoned the strong north wind, with which she flattened the waves in the swimmer's path, so that Odysseus, favourite of Zeus, might be rescued from the jaws of death and come into the hands of the seafaring Phaeacians. For 2 nights and 2 days he was driven by the heavy seas. Man has not slept, my God. Time and again he thought he was doomed, but in the morning of the 3rd day, which dawn with her beautiful tresses opened in all her beauty, the wind dropped. A breathless calm set in, and Odysseus, keeping a sharp lookout, caught a glimpse of land close by as he was lifted by a mighty wave. He felt all the relief that a man's children feel when their father, who has been in bed wasting away with a long painful illness, in the grip of some malignant power, passes the crisis by the god's will, and they know that he will live. Odysseus' happiness was like that when he caught that welcome glimpse of earth and trees. He swam quickly on in his eagerness to set foot on solid ground, but when he had come within shouting distance of the shore, he heard the thunder of surf on a rocky coast. With an angry roar, the great seas were battering at the rocky land, and all was veiled in spray. There were no coves, no harbours that would hold a ship, nothing but headlands jutting out, sheer rock and jagged reefs. When he realized this, Odysseus' knees grew weak and his heart failed. In his misery, he communed with his courageous spirit.
Oh, misery,
He groaned.
Against all hope, Zeus let me see land after I won my way across that vast expanse of water only to find there is no escape from the foaming sea, and all my efforts will have been in vain. Offshore the pointed reefs, all around a raging sea, behind a smooth sheer cliff. Deep water near the shore, no place where a man can touch bottom and scramble to safety. If I try to land, I may be lifted by a roller and dashed against the solid rock. And I'd have had my trouble for nothing. If I swim further down the coast on the chance of finding a natural harbour, where the waves strike the beach sideways, I'm afraid another squall will snatch me and drag me out groaning into the teeming deep. Or some demon may let loose against me one of the many monsters that the great Amphitrite breeds in her seas, and I am well aware that the famed Earth-shaker is at odds with me.
This inward debate was cut short by a tremendous wave which swept him forward to the rugged shore, where his skin would have been torn off him and all his bones broken, had not the bright-eyed goddess Athene put it into his head to grab hold of a rock with both hands as he was swept in. He clung there groaning, while the great wave swept by, but no sooner had he escaped its fury than its backward rush caught him with full force and flung him far out to sea. Pieces of skin stripped from his Pieces of skin stripped from his sturdy hands were left sticking to the crag, like the pebbles that stick to the suckers of a squid when it is torn from its lair. The great surge hid him, and there the unhappy man would have come to an unpredestined end if Athene had not given him a good idea. He struggled on the surface, swam clear of the coastal breakers, and then swam along outside them, keeping an eye on the land, in the hope of lighting on some natural harbour with shelving beaches. Presently his progress brought him to the mouth of a fast-running stream, which seemed to be the best place because it was clear of rocks and sheltered from the winds. The current told him that he was at a river's mouth, and in his heart he prayed to the god of the stream.
Hear me, Lord, whoever you are. I come to you as many others have come with a prayer. I am a fugitive from the sea and from Poseidon's malice. Any poor wanderer who comes in supplication is given respect, especially by the immortal gods. I am such a man, and I now turn to you after much suffering, and seek the sanctuary of your stream. Take pity on me, Master, I am your suppliant.
In answer to his prayers, the river checked its current, and holding back its waves, made the water smooth in the swimmer's path, and so brought him safely to land at its mouth. Odysseus's knees gave way, and his sturdy arms sagged. He was exhausted by his struggle with the sea. All his flesh was swollen, and streams of brine gushed from his mouth and nostrils. Winded and speechless, he lay there too weak to stir, overwhelmed by a terrible fatigue. Yet directly he got his wind and breath came into his lungs, he unwound the goddess's veil from his waist and let it drop into the river as it rushed out to sea. The strong current swept it downstream, and in a moment it was in Ino's hands. Odysseus turned away from the river, threw himself down in the reeds and kissed the bountiful earth. And now, in perplexity, he communed with his mighty spirit.
Oh, what will happen to me now?
He groaned.
What will become of me after, if I stay by the river and keep awake all through the wretched night? Bitter frost and drenching dew together may do for me. I'm already at my last gasp, and a cold wind can blow up from a river just before dawn. But if I climb up the slope into the thick woods and lie in the dense undergrowth and shake off my chill and my exhaustion, and fall into a sound sleep, I'm afraid I may make a meal for beasts of prey.
However, in the end he decided this was the better course, and set off towards the wooded ground. Not far from the river he found a copse in a clearing. Here he crept under a pair of bushes, one an olive, the other a wild olive, which grew from the same stem with their branches so closely intertwined that when the damp winds blew, not a breath could enter, nor the rays of the sun penetrate their shade, nor the rain soak through. Odysseus crawled into his shelter, and at once heaped up the dry leaves into a wide bed. The ground was littered with piles of them, enough to provide covering for 2 or 3 men in the hardest winter weather. The noble, long-suffering Odysseus was delighted with his bed, and lay down in the middle of it, covering himself with a blanket of leaves. This he did as carefully as a farmer on a lonely farm, far away from any neighbours, buries a glowing log under black ashes to keep his fire alive, and save him from having to seek light elsewhere. And now Athene filled his eyes with sleep and sealed their lids. Sleep to soothe his pain and utter weariness.